Welcome everyone to the 29th edition of In Your Best Interest, an ALM First podcast, a show that explores common depository challenges, gives you an insider's view of the latest market trends, and shares stories and insights from industry leaders. I'm your host, Mike Ensweiler. Leadership succession represents one of the most critical yet challenging transitions for credit unions, with CEO turnover expected to accelerate dramatically over the next 5 years. In this episode, we will explore the realities of succession planning, examining how institutions can effectively prepare their internal talent pipeline while aligning leadership competencies with future organizational needs. These insights come at a time when many credit unions are facing the retirement of baby boomer executives and the need for transformative leadership in an increasingly complex financial landscape. Today, I'm joined by Dee Dee Myers, a renowned leadership consultant who specializes in credit union CEO searches, executive development, assessments, and more. She'll share candid perspectives on board responsibilities, candidate preparation strategies, and practical approaches to developing internal talent. We'll explore both the difficulties and rewards of building a strategic succession plan that prepares your organization for its next chapter of leadership. Hi, Dee Dee. Thanks again for joining me on the show.
Good to be here, Mike. Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot of buzz in the industry that over the course of the next 5 years, plus or minus, there's going to be a lot of retirements going on in terms of credit union CEOs. Maybe just talk to us a little bit about, kind of what you're hearing, what you're understanding in terms of, that turnover coming up.
Sure. Yeah. So we all know that all the baby boomers will turn 65 years old by the age 2030, and they're terming out. Their retirement plans are coming to of age. So a lot of turnover there. That you hear about mergers and acquisitions. And then, Mike, there's some CEOs who are actually starting to leave early. They think it's time for them to go. So they might go at age 58 or 60. And what I'm noticing there is the reason why they decide to go early is they recognize that the organization is ready for a big change, transformative change. And they go, I think somebody else should come in and lead that. Instead of them starting it, they're making room for the next leader to come in and do that. So that's where we're seeing an CEO turnover. Last year, we were super busy with CEO searches. We worked on about 25 different projects, which is about twice what we normally do. So we staffed up and teamed up for that. But what we also noticed, for every CEO that leaves, within a couple years, you're going to lose about 2 C-suite members as well. So you've got change at both of those levels. And to complicate it further, we're seeing 30 to 40% of board members actively saying they're going to withdraw or retire off the board within 3 to 4 years. So there's 3 levels of leadership turning over there, Mike.
Wow. And so, when you get contacted to, do a search for an institution, what are you seeing in terms of, internal maybe versus external CEO selections?
Yeah, so that's good. So we're seeing some of our projects or boards are declaring they're going to just go internal. And nicely here done, Mike, is that they've done the work. They put together over 2, 3, 4 years a CEO Readiness Now program and developed methodically and intentionally the CEO candidates. So those are great. I think about 5 of our 25 last year were that. Some very wonderful case examples there. Some of the others will say, yes, we have internal candidates. We definitely want to go external and look. They feel that they want to do their fiduciary responsibility and look at the best candidates and then have candidates internally and externally to choose from. What we see in those, unfortunately, though, is that the external candidates, Mike, seem to be more CEO ready now than the internal in many of those examples. And the reason is when there's an external candidate, they've actually done a lot of work. They've done cohort learning. They've done some CEO planning. Their resume is ready. They've taken on extra responsibilities and authorities in the organization. They've done one-on-one coaching. And that's different than, unfortunately, some of the internal candidates who say, oh, our CEO is retiring, I'll apply. That's the next level of leadership for me. But they haven't done the work. So I think we can talk about that more.
Sure. So 20 of the 25 you worked on went external. So
Yeah.
then what do you see is needed in order to increase the success rate of internal candidates being promoted? Let's expand on your last thought there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're advocating for is that it is definitely a board's responsibility to make sure there's a good CEO, a viable CEO succession plan. So the way we look at it is to be CEO ready, you have to be ready within 6 months. If you're targeted for CEO development, that goes in the range of 6 to 36 months. And then learning or ready future, Mike, is 36 months, maybe to 5 years. What we're not seeing is the board stipulating to the CEO, go forward, CEO, and get our candidates ready. So when we do see boards saying, CEO, develop our candidates or bring candidates forward, the missing link there is the board never has the conversation about what they might need in that role in the future. So what we're saying, let's go futuristic here. Let's look out 3 years and 5 years and see what kind of competencies do we need to lead our organization in this world that we can't even anticipate now, and what might those look like? And we're advocating that it's not a linear list of competencies, that we pick 3 to 5 most important competencies and characteristics that can be interwoven so the new CEO can pivot when needed. So the board does this work. So we use our CEO star performer for that. Then it gets turned over to the CEO to help develop the internal candidates. And then we can talk about internal development and what resources are available externally there.
Yeah, so I mean, who's ultimately responsible for the development of these internal candidates?
Good question. So the board will say, CEO, get them ready. The CEO will say, hey, internal potential successors, this is what we can do. So what gets mixed up is like, really, is that accountability question. I believe the board needs to advocate for it and expect it. The CEO backs it up. But Mike, at the end of the day, it's up to the internal candidate to be accountable for their own development. They can make requests, they can make offers, they can seek that learning. They have to step up to it. What gets mixed up sometimes is when the board and the CEO say to maybe chief financial officer or chief lending officer, we're going to get ready. We're going to look at CEO succession. Here's what we're going to do, and we're going to give you a development plan. Sometimes the internal hears that as a promise to be the CEO. And what it is, it's a promise to give the resources to be able to go forward and do it. But it's up to that internal leadership potential candidate or leader there to actually take advantage of it and move forward. So three rungs of accountability. At the end of the day, it's that candidate has to align their skills with what the board and the CEO is doing.
So if you were to do a poll right now, what do you think a board would say, or what are you hearing from boards to a question like this? Where is your board in preparation for CEO succession? Would it be A, they have a documented plan and identified internal candidates, or maybe B, they've discussed it but don't have a formal plan? C, they expect to rely on an external search when needed. D, they'll do an internal and external search, or E, they're unsure.
Yeah, mostly B. We've discussed it, but we don't have a formal plan. Large percentage don't have a formal plan. Of the percentages of people that say they have a plan, I would say it's not formal, and Mike, it's not strategic. It could be a replacement plan. Here's our CEO, let's replace, but it's not a strategic succession plan aligning the competencies to the future needs of the organization. So I would say they discuss it, but it's not formal. Discuss it might be, oh yeah, we mentioned it in a board meeting 4 months ago, but we've not done anything about it.
I saw a statistic recently. I don't know if the statistic is recent, but it was something I saw recently, at least from America's credit unions, that said that only about 54% of credit union boards have a succession plan in place. And
Mhm.
so, the clients that you work with, it sounds like that's pretty typical. And even if we talked about it, they may or may not think that that's a plan. So, what are the types of things that you're trying to educate boards on? Maybe it's leadership traits, or here's how you build a plan, or what's kind of top of mind in that area.
Yeah, so we're helping them actually put process together or codify or memorialize a process. Call it a plan is in there as well, Mike. And it's if something happens and it's an emergency situation, here's our interim. And if our CEO gives us 2 years notice or 3 years notice, this is what we're going to do. And putting a budget together. Sometimes we even encourage, even though you're not looking for 2 or 3 years, go get some proposals from maybe 2 or 3 different search firms so you know what the search firm will do for you. You know the scope of what their authority is or their accountability or their support or guidance for you. But really is looking at what are the leadership practices needed in the future. So some of the things that we're seeing is number one, a lot of our boards are asking for what's called transformative leadership. They want a CEO to come in and who has transformative experience versus just step every day a different thing we're going to do, or transitional leadership, we call it, or transactional leadership. We're hearing a lot around we want somebody who has a vision and strategic thinking. So we're seeing a lot of internal and external candidates omitted from the process because in an interview, Mike, they don't even bring up the word vision. They don't even bring up the word strategy. And that's a game changer. They're out if they can't do that. We're also seeing different from the Great Recession when we really looked for financial expertise because we needed that to keep us healthy from a financial perspective. We're seeing that the boards want what we call cross-enterprise experience, somebody that's not just functionally led and part of the organization, like finance or marketing or digital, somebody who's impacted the organization on a cross-enterprise piece. There's more there if you want to go into, but those are top that we're hearing right now.
Okay. And so, as a person who's used your search firm, I think, certainly when people compare those quotes, you said to get the three kind of proposals, fee is obviously something that jumps out at folks. But, I think one of the things that I've been extremely pleased with is your use of assessments to better understand potential candidates in their kind of their competencies and maybe their fit inside of the organization. So, maybe talk a little bit about your thoughts about using those types of assessments on the front end and in how that, is maybe a best practice that people should be doing.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the reasons we started doing the assessments about 20 years ago, Mike, is, we're trained in leadership. We're all leadership, certified leadership coaches here who, run our key searches. And we thought, okay, we get it, but how can we help our clients or our boards really understand the characteristics, leadership characteristics of the candidate? So we went and looked for some assessments that would give us more of a quantitative perspective there and also back up our qualitative assessment. And also the other thing there is when we do an assessment, somebody gets placed, it helps with the onboarding. So you definitely don't want to hire off an assessment, but it will help better understand the candidate and provide some validity there. We want to look at how does that person respond to the demands of the environment? Are they most comfortable sitting in the office every day? Or are they the kind of person that will get up and look at the internal environment, external environment, see where the competitive forces are, see how we line up for that, their level of drive. We also want to look at the interpersonal skills. How do they build trust? How do they exude trust? Relationships are so important. We're also seeing because of the pace of the environment, CEOs have many competing commitments. And so how do they respond to the pace of the environment? And then this piece around how do they respond to regulators and compliance needs, all those kind of things. So we look at can they keep the organization safe from a regulatory perspective, but also be innovative. So those are some of the things we look at. But at the end of the day, the one I really rely on is the emotional intelligence, Mike. I think we need a threshold of emotional intelligence in the CEO role. And so we've collected all this data from all of our candidates. It's hot off the press just like 2 days ago. And we're looking at here's what the most successful CEOs have in different areas of emotional intelligence. So we'll have that ready for reviewing here in the next couple of weeks. But there's a threshold there that we look at emotional intelligence.
That's exciting. So, what words of advice do you have to individuals who believe they may want to be a CEO someday?
Well, one of the things is start early. Don't start thinking about being a CEO the day that your CEO gives notice or announces their retirement. Look ahead. I think it's this piece about professional clarity, self-clarity on who we are and what we bring to the table, and how it aligns with the needs of the organization, how it aligns with how the board sees us. So one of the opportunities or challenges that internal candidates have is the board sees them for maybe their 15 minutes of fame every quarter giving a report. They don't really see them in many cases in other venues. So there's opportunities there to get to know the board and show your stuff there. But I think that whole piece around self-clarity, what do we bring to the table? I also say seek teachers, seek mentors. Don't wait for your current CEO or your board to say, go forth and develop yourself. I think one of the most powerful traits a leader can bring is to say, I need a teacher, I need a coach, I need a mentor, and go and ask someone, would you teach this to me? Would you be my coach in this regard? The other piece is, we have a super need, a big need in organizations to give rigorous feedback. We're so polite and so diplomatic that I think we could muscle up on giving feedback and asking for feedback. So we actually teach our candidates how to go and ask for rigorous feedback and so therefore they get a better idea of how people see them and just don't settle. That continuous learning. I just got off the phone with somebody who wants to be CEO candidate, and what I heard was, I don't have time to be a continuous learner. I'm too busy managing the daily task of the organization. I go, there's a gap here.
Yeah.
There's a gap. So that's a big story to talk about right there.
And it gets back to your vision idea, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
person is obviously myopic and operationally focused versus if you're going to lead an organization, especially in these challenging and uncertain times, I mean, you really have to have a vision and be able to persevere through whatever it takes to fulfill that vision.
The piece about vision I hear a lot of, especially from internal candidates, is I have a vision, but I don't feel it can be heard, so I don't say it.
Mm,
I just go along. And I go, how can you turn that switch on when you're a CEO now? Is that a
right.
switch you can turn on overnight? So a lot of work to be done there, a lot of opportunity, which is exciting for us.
So speaking of switch, let's switch the conversation over to the board. Earlier you said that it's the board's responsibility to decide the competencies and characteristics of a future CEO. What support do they need to ensure they get it right?
Oh, that the board gets it right?
Correct.
Yeah. I think they need a partner to help guide that process, Mike. So some boards just yeah, that's a big question. I think that's one of the things that we do really well at DDJ is help to appropriately challenge boards on what we see they need, because we've worked with hundreds of organizations like this. We can actually see what could go right, go wrong. And I think that's our responsibility as a consultant, is to help guide the board on what they need. So what we do is, sometimes they come to us with a list. Here's our list. I go, well, let's back it up. Let's take a strategic perspective here and get aligned on how we want to be in a narrative for our future CEO. So if somebody comes up to you, a member comes up to you and says, what do you expect from your next CEO? Or what's your vision of success for your CEO? It's not a good idea to give them a list of, oh, they should have a degree in this. They should have 5 years experience in lending and 3 years in member experience. That doesn't matter. What matters is what the end result is and how that person is going to lead through their presence and their expertise, their emotional intelligence, all of that. So getting the board aligned on that, that's a big piece of work. And it's not something that's easily done over Zoom. So the board, Mike, has to make the commitment to come together to do that work and get aligned. Then we can get the list of competencies. I think that gets it right. And I want to say, yeah, that helps us have a really high sticky rate over the last 30, 35 years and great success in placements of CEOs.
Okay, so we've got some alignment now with the board in terms of competencies and characteristics for the future CEO. We've hired a great search firm like DDJ to do the search. Now we've got the candidates. What can the board of directors do to prepare for interviewing these CEO candidates?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, we do this work with board development involving the performance of a board. It's called, there's 6 board types. So I'll just talk about a couple here. One is an imperial type. An imperial board type is the type of board that just super relied on the CEO to run everything, decide where the organization's going, decide who's going to be on the board, decide the strategic objectives, decide the agenda, and the board is a good rubber stamper. So what their challenge is in interviewing is actually being able to be in a rigorous dialogue with the candidate. So Mike will do some more coaching and be in the room and help them along with that. And then at the other end, there's that higher performing board that has had a wonderful leader. They've had a partnership between the board and the CEO. That's a higher level dialogue. They're in that strategic and futuristic thinking conversation, and they get very innovative and high level there. And then our job is to make sure there's some reality checks going on. Can that CEO candidate who's speaking from a futuristic and innovative perspective, can they actually get things done? Will they really listen to people? So that's a different polarity that we manage in the interview room. And then there's others, but those are the two that we see the most. And it kind of makes it a lot of fun.
So, we're coming to the close here, and I just have a couple more questions for you. So just playing that out a little bit. If I'm one of the 46% of the credit unions without a succession plan, or maybe I'm one with one, but it maybe isn't as robust as it could or should be. What advice do you have for these boards so they're able to make, this important kind of succession plan CEO decision?
Yeah, a couple things. If we're 2 or more years out, definitely once a quarter, take a look at your CEO succession plan and look at the competency set. And also important there, Mike, is what are we doing as a board so we're ready for that high performing CEO? What are we learning? What are we developing? And constantly look at your internal candidates and see how you see them developing. Also, for boards that are continuous learners and they go to conferences, ask other boards, what did you do that was successful? And I always love to look at candidates or potential candidates at conferences, which is one reason why I go, is I get to meet people that I might have an opportunity to work with in the future. But the board has to start asking those tough questions of themselves and of their CEO and their potential internal candidates. Just be educated. Like, go to the ALM First Institute, go to the ALM First Forum, increase that learning and increase that capital in the boardroom, and just don't stop. Just don't rely on the next CEO to bring everything to the table. Be challenging.
Well, as we wrap things up here, Dee Dee, any final thoughts in general for CEO candidates or succession planning or board hiring, or in general? What do you want to leave us with?
Yeah, well, one thing for potential CEO candidates is, like I said, start early. We have this wonderful program. It's called the See Yourself. And I can look around the country and I can see CEOs who are doing a great job that maybe 5 years ago they were thinking about being a CEO, Mike, and they went through the See Yourself program, which is a one-on-one intensive where you really peel back the layers, go to what motivates and drives that person's leadership and help cultivates them to be CEO ready. I would say that even for internal candidates, going through that is a powerful thing. From the board perspective, I would say if you don't know when your CEO is going to leave, you haven't asked that question, and maybe you're afraid to ask it because you think the CEO might think, you're trying to run them off. Just say, could you give us 2 years notice? And make a deal there. Give us 1 year notice, give us 2 year notice. And then if you want to extend it, you can. But put a pin in it, Mike, and drive for alignment there. Those are two things that I would suggest.
Awesome. Well, it's always a learning experience for me talking with you, Dee Dee, and I always enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Strategic CEO succession planning is crucial for credit unions, as Dee Dee's insights revealed. The key takeaways that I got from this conversation are: one, most boards lack formal plans aligning future leadership and organizational needs, and less than 54% have them. Number two, internal candidates face unique challenges in shifting to a CEO mindset. And third, effective development demands shared accountability. boards, CEOs, and candidates all play a role in growth and readiness. As we wrap up, let's reflect on the evolving financial landscape that Dee Dee highlighted. Credit unions must adapt to these changes, and that starts with intentional leadership preparation. Thank you for joining us on In Your Best Interest. We hope this discussion provides valuable perspective as you evaluate your own leadership pipeline and succession planning strategies. We have a robust workshop, conference, and webinar schedule, so be sure to visit our website for more details on these, as well as our Education Hub and Resource Center for recorded webinars, articles, and more. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for listening to In Your Best Interest, an ALM First podcast.
The content in this podcast is provided for informational purposes and should not be relied upon as recommendations or financial planning advice. We encourage you to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals regarding all investment decisions. Current and future holdings are subject to risk, and past performance is no guarantee of future results. Podcasts should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part. Information presented herein is for discussion and illustrative purposes only and is not a recommendation or an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The views and opinions expressed by the ALM First Financial Advisor speakers are their own as of the date of the recording. Any such views are subject to change at any time based upon market or other conditions, and ALM First Financial Advisors disclaims any responsibility to update such views. These views should not be relied on as investment advice, and because investment decisions are based on numerous factors, may not be relied on as an indication of trading intent on behalf of any ALM First Financial Advisors product. Neither ALM First Financial Advisors nor the speaker can be held responsible for any direct or incidental loss incurred by applying any of the information offered. ALM First Financial Advisors is an SEC-registered investment advisor with a fiduciary duty that requires it to act in the best interests of clients and to place the interests of clients before its own. However, registration as an investment advisor does not imply any level of skill or training.